Hello and welcome back to your Hobby Connection. We appreciate you guys stopping by as we continue on with our Lionel 2024 diesel catalog review. Up today we're going to have the E6's, the SW8's, and some U28C's. So on the E6 units, they were an EMC/EMD production. What I mean by that is the E6's were produced as the last line for the EMC, which is the Electromotive Corporation, before they were officially rolled under the GM division and they're called EMD. Now, fun fact, the E6's were actually produced out of sequence. So the EA 1, 2, 3, 4 were in sequence of when they came out. But the E5's came out a year after the E6's. So it was EA 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5, and then 7, 8, 9. So that's a bit of a fun fact for you right there. One of the other things that was cool about these units is that the E2 to EA were the ones that used a Winton motor for their motive power. And the E3 and beyond used the EMD 567 series. And in the later years, they used the ABC versions of the 567s to get them a little extra horsepower and motive power capabilities. These were the most successful units to date. As a matter of fact, the A units, these guys right here, ended up selling over 91 units, and the B series sold around 26. Now these were an A1A power series truck. So the first wheel was powered, the middle wheel was unpowered, and the rear wheel was powered on the truck set. And you had two trucks of that nature. So an A1A and an A1A for the A units and for the B units. Now, what Lionel has done is, as we can see here, like the B&O and the Southern Railroads, use the A-B options the most commonly. And then the GM/Seaboard Road used the AA, as well as the Milwaukee Road using the AA series. So that's kind of cool history that they used a prototypical alignment of how the railroads would run these locomotives. So for the Milwaukee Road and the Seaboard Railroad, if you want to throw in a super base B unit, you can. So you can have an ABA or an ABBA or however you want to make that work, making it look really cool. That being said, we also have some pretty cool things. One of the cool features, and I didn't realize this was a feature until I started looking more into it, but yes, GM, who initially made the locomotive as the demonstrators, who then sold them to Seaboard, did make an A and a B unit that were displaying the clear glass to show what the inside of the motors looked like. And true to form, Lionel is actually providing an inside look into what these locomotives look like when they operate. So that's pretty doggone cool. Now, the E1s were also very specifically designed for the roads that they were being used for. Once you got to the E3s and beyond, they were more streamlined for all railroads. Prior to that, they were more tailored to which railroad was ordering them, with features and things like that. These were passenger locomotives, so what that means is they had steam generator capabilities and they were fast, because streamlined equals fast. So with them being super successful, what made them that way? Well, they were built in 1939 to 1942. And they had 2,000 horsepower, they had a tractive effort of 56,500 pounds start, and they could move it at a constant of 31,000 pounds of tractive effort. They clocked in at about 315,000 pounds for the A unit and about 290,000 pounds for the B unit. They had a fuel capacity of 1,200 gallons, and they had a top speed of 116 miles per hour. This is 1939 to 1942. These things were booking it. So that was pretty impressive speed for the day. And as you can see, we've got some beautiful looking units here, as well as the option, as you saw for the Southern. They used the A unit quite a bit and the B unit sparingly, only when they needed the extra power. And as you also noticed in the other photo here, it is very similar to exactly what GM did for the demonstrator that they were showing off at the World's Fair. So like I said earlier, I love it. I mean, it's amazing to look at. Now, one thing that you will note is, if you read Lionel's little disclaimer up here, they are providing B units for lines that don't have or never did operate a B unit. So for these A units and B units, they operate on a 036 curve. They are 37 inches long for the 2 units combined. The Super Legacy base units are dummy couplered between the B units on one side. They have smoke-driven units, and they are pretty doggone awesome. So the Baltimore, Ohio set, the ABs, the numbers were correct, and these were built in 1940. The GM/Seaboard, that one was a little bit harder for me to find. The numbers for the Seaboard actually came out to be different, because they only had like 1 or 2 of those, and I could not find the dummy B unit. I think it was just the 1939 is what they were called, or the 1940s. So that one was a bit on the pain in the neck there. Some of the 1940s were correct for their A's and B's. The numbers were the same. The Milwaukee Road, they only ever had 1 B unit. And that was it. They had the 2 A's, and that was pretty much what they had. So what we saw with the Milwaukee Roads was pretty much what they had. Now, moving on, we have the other set of Rock Island units and City San Francisco Road units. Now, fun fact, Milwaukee Roads, not Milwaukee Roads, the Rock Island was 1941. They did not have any B units, so this was a fantasy paint scheme / road number here, which is unfortunate that they never had any Bs, because they probably would have looked amazing, but they didn't. So unfortunately, that's what we got there. We do have the City of San Francisco, which was a joint passenger service that was operated by multiple railroads on the overland route from Chicago to San Francisco. The average travel time each way was around 46 hours. I did notate that in one direction it was 45.5 to 45.75, and then going from San Francisco to Chicago was between 42.25 to 43.5 hours. But on average, you could expect to travel each direction in about 46 hours, which for the time was pretty doggone fast. They are also offering some Rock Island commuter cars. These were known as the Al Capone coaches. These guys have a bit of a history behind them, because they were built in 1925 by Standard Steel Corporation, or Standard Steel Company. The Al Capone cars got their name because of the time frame of their operation, which so happened to be during the time of Al Capone's reign in Chicago. These guys ran in and around the Chicago area, and some believe he would have ridden on these. One of the cars people believe he might have ridden on was the 2541, because the infamous gangster rode on the commuter rail so often. Some believe the 2541 might have been one of the cars he got to ride on. Unfortunately, it is speculation only, because no hard proof has been proven yet. Now, if somebody has a photo or proof that he rode on the 2541, I'm sure the preservation history people would love it, because that would be pretty cool. But that's kind of how they got their nickname as the Al Capone cars, just because he rode the Rock Island often, and he was seen coming on and off commuter cars that looked similar to these right here. And as we'll see, this is the one that is preserved, the 2541. So that's some pretty cool history. These ran on the line until the 1970s, when they started to get replaced. Only about 50 or so survived out of the over 100 that were produced and operated during the time frame of the railroad. The Rock Islands soon transferred out of service into the 1980s, when they were consumed by a different company altogether. So that's kind of sad that we lost the Al Capone cars in operation, but the good news is around 50 or so made it to the preservation era. Some are actually operating, and some are just static displays. Up next, we have the Streamliner version of these guys, the Burlington route, with the Silver Racer as some of these locomotives. Now, fun fact on these silver locomotives, these were the BN Silver card silver streamlined locomotives and cars. Now, the Silver Steed and the Silver Racer were ex-locomotives from a former railroad, which just so happened to be the C&S, which was the Colorado and Southern Railroad, who acquired these in the 1940s, 1940 to be exact. So these were two ex-C&S locomotives right here, and this guy right here, the 9980B, was actually a Fort Worth and Denver locomotive prior to the conversion. So the C&S and the FW&D all combined into operating under the BN route, or the CB&Q before they became the BN. So the CB&Q acquired the C&S, and then the BN acquired the FW&D. But these all operated under the CB&Q or the BN logo at one point in time before they became the BNSF. So that's a bit of fun fact there, that these three road numbers and names were actually under different railroads before they became officially a BN locomotive set. So that's some pretty cool information there. I love that Lionel was able to sneak that little bit of history beyond us, so they didn't even notate that that's what they did, which was like, come on guys, that would have been some pretty cool history to include in your video here. Alright, so with these guys being primarily operational, I did have some photos, and as we will see here, that is what they look like when they are operating as an AA unit with the passenger service behind it. Now, fun thing is, these operate on an 036 curve, but the passengers cars that they're selling are operating on an 054. Oh, and I did forget to mention that these guys are all the same price, $1,200 for the AB or the AA set, and the super base units are $499 or $500. The 2-pack on this passenger set is $500. The car with sound is $450. The other ones are $999.99 or $1,000. These are 21-inch steel-sided looking cars with the aluminum frames. So they're aluminum cars that look like the kind of the steel cars that they had back in the day. The rail sound designer makes the clickety-clack sounds and has some departure and noises that you'll get to hear as they operate. The baggage car is 18 inches actually, but everything else is 21 inches. Which I suppose is somewhat prototypical, but it just kind of feels weird that they have this guy right here a little bit shorter than the other passenger cars. Makes me wonder if they're kind of reusing the tooling on some of the other cars. One thing I did forget, I'll jump back to the Al Capone cars here. These guys are 054 once again, and they are 19 inches. So bear in mind that's what they've done here, is made that. Alright, so now that we've completed our series here, I will once again make the notation of, I wish they would have put the ABA, or the the ABB series together with the locomotives and cars as one big package deal, and then drop the price. Because as it stands, you're looking at around $3,000 to $3,500 for all of this. If you want this entire package here, you got to buy all of it separated. The other thing that they did kind of cheat on with this particular one right here is they just painted it as a shadow effect for the corrugation instead of actually corrugating it. I get that they're trying to save money, but it's kind of one of those things you're going, man, it would have been cool to have them as corrugated, but I get what they're up to. Up next, we do have the SW8's. These guys were the also EMD motor power. These were light switchers. They weren't very popular in terms of what others might have sold in the time frame. The biggest thing that these things enjoyed was the fact that these were the BBs, so you had 2 axles, each one was powered on this unit. These were some of the more off-brand branches that operated these units. I do have a list of all of them that operated, so that's good news. These were 1954 to 1950. They had 800 horsepower, they had a service weight of 230,000 pounds, a starting tractive effort of 57,000 pounds, and 36,000 continuous. They had a fuel capacity of 600 gallons, so pretty low, but when you're doing yard work and yard switching, you're never too far away from the fuel depot. They had a top speed of 65 miles an hour. Now, as light switchers, they were not designed for heavy-duty trains. They were not designed for long mainline operations. These were short branch line / yard switching and minor delivery units, mostly seen in the industry or the small industry railroads. So if you had like a yard that was like 4 or 5 tracks for an industry, primarily you would see these things in these areas because they're small, they're capable, they get the job done without any issues. They were heavily reliable. As a matter of fact, they're so reliable that some are still pulling trains on the passenger side today and even doing switch duty. So we're talking, what, almost 70 years later, we're seeing these things in operation. They are great motors. These were very similar to the SW7 and the NW2's, but the S-powered had more powerful units compared to the SW7's. So, like I said, 300 of these guys were made, and they did pretty good. The Air Force motors were actually purchased and used by the U.S. Army initially, and then the Air Force got a hold of them somehow as well. So the number is kind of a phantom number, but it's pretty cool. The Detroit Edison locomotive, number 214, did operate, but it was an SW900, and which was a D-rated SW8. So go figure. This SW900 right here was actually purchased in 1956, so it was not an SW8, technically speaking, if you're going based on the name and the paint scheme and the year. It's just a D-rated SW8. The Erie Lackawanna number 364 was actually renumbered later on in its life. It was first numbered as 51. And sorry, it was built in 1951, but it was renumbered later on when they had a change of operator. The Reading and Northern locomotive right here is an ex-DLNW locomotive, which they purchased in 1953. The Texas and Pacific owned this locomotive, and its number was correct, and it was built in 1952 for them. The U.S. Air Force actually was a 1951 Army order, but the U.S. Air Force was able to get their hands on this guy here later on. And then, of course, we have the Reading, or the Chicago and Northwestern, I'm sorry. That number did operate underneath them. It was purchased in 1951. So that concludes our SW8's. Moving on, we have the U28C. The U28C's were a General Electric locomotive. Now, bad news for you guys, only one of these locomotives ever made it to survival, and it was the 2804. If you want to have heartbreak and you want to have a headache, go Google 2804, because what's been done to it is an absolute shame and a disgrace to the name of preservation. I will show you a photo of what it looks like current day, but be prepared to have some choice words of aggravation, because I did, because I was mad about it. These guys are almost identical to the U25C, but were more powerful than them. They were not very popular due to the railroads trying to embrace a higher powered engine, because at this time you had GE, you had EMD, and you had Alco all competing for around the 3,000 horsepower mark. But this was their stopgap to try to bridge that low-powered U25C for the higher-powered U30C that they're coming out with a little bit later on. So this was kind of their in-between motor. So that's why they only sold a total of 71 of these units, which is even more important as to why at least one got saved. But what they did to the number one that got saved is frustrating. These were passenger variant capable. That was the U28CG with the steam generator effect. The Santa Fe was the only one that bought this. And with the different gearing, they were able to get it to over 90 miles per hour. These were only produced in 1 year, which was the 1966 model. They had a tractive effort of 92,000 pounds starting, 79,500 continuous. The horsepower is 2,800 with a weight of 395,500 pounds and fuel capacity of 3,000 gallons. And the freight variant only had a top speed of 70 miles per hour. Here's what the L&N looked like. So we have 4 pictures of the sides and what they operated and some of the different numbers. So beautiful design, well thought out, well laid out here. If you go and look at this other one right here, this was the 2804, and this is how it currently stands in a museum. It's actually in a covered museum now, but this was the disgrace that we were talking about earlier. It's kind of frustrating that this is what it ended up looking like. So we're going to run down the numbers here really quick. In 1966, the Conrail did not actually own this particular locomotive. Well, they did, but that was a former Pennsylvania Railroad, U28C. They moved over to the Conrail, and the first time they were found out was the Conrail 6500 series. So the 6521 was Conrail CR 6521, and then later on in the 1979 timeframe, they renumbered it to 6821. The same thing for the 6530. It was originally numbered as 6530 for the Pennsylvania Railroad. Then later on, it was the CR 6530, and then on the renumbering scheme, it became the 6830. Now, the L&N locomotive did operate, and they were only built in 1966 because, remember, they only built these for 1 year. So the numbers were accurate, and they were running. The Pennsylvania 6520 and 28 did operate, and these were actually part of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Penn Central, once again, they came underneath a different name of the railroad, but the numbers of the locomotives stayed the same, and these were all part of the same series. Now, the Southern Pacific did operate these guys with the correct numbers here as well. And we've talked about the UP 2804 and the 2800, which was the crying shame of the world. And then we have the Seaboard system. Now, fun fact here, these were the XL&N locomotives. The L&N had them as 1526 to 1532. When they became the Seaboard system, they were renumbered to 3524 to 3530. I could not track down which numbers got what, but I'm going to guess that the 1526 became the 3524 and the 1532 became the 3530. That is just my summation and my estimation. But I can't prove it one way or the other, so that's what I'm going to go with. So, thank you guys for watching this video so far. If you guys like this video, please share it with your friends and family. Leave a like. Also, subscribe to the channel so we can get this channel in the right direction, and you guys can be notified the next time we're coming up with the next video for Lionel. We're also doing our narrow gauge Kubernetes and Toltec operations video, which is coming out every Saturday. So make sure you guys stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time around.